The name Paul Massey still rings bells in Salford, Greater Manchester. Paul Massey had a profound impact on the criminal underworld in the city, and many local people saw him as a pillar of the community. His murder in 2015 was a prime example of a gangland hit. It was premeditated, loud and brazen, making headlines all across the UK. The death of Paul Massey shook Manchester and gave way to even more bloodshed, resulting in retaliation attacks, shootings and further deaths. Let's begin this tale by diving into who Paul Massey was and how he earned his fearsome and well-respected reputation. Massey had grown up in Salford and was nicknamed Mr. Big in the 1990s, following riots in Manchester. A local councillor had come up with the nickname, saying that Massey was the force behind gang violence in the city. Around this same time, Paul Massey was heavily involved in the drug game, operating as a major supplier. Not only was he making money from this, but he was also running a lucrative protection racket. If a club or pub didn't accept his protection, then the premises would be torched or smashed up. With a hardened crew of loyal foot soldiers behind him, Massey made a killing and wound up venturing into legitimate income streams to keep the heat at bay. However, throughout his life, Manchester police made a determined effort to disrupt Paul's activities, and they routinely kicked in his front door. Their behavior bordered on harassment, and they really wanted to cage him. Paul Massey was their number one target, and he knew it. The 21st century was approaching, and Paul Massey was doing well for himself. His wife Louise had recently given birth to his daughter, and everything was seemingly on the up and up. However, trouble always found its way to Paul Massey. Whether it was karma from all of his crimes finally catching up to him, or him never being willing to back down from a punch-up, we'll never know. What is known is that Paul became involved in a street fight and ended up stabbing a man. Paul was already a major target for Manchester police. I'm sure that they were rubbing their hands, knowing that he was finished. Paul had fled Britain, hiding out in Amsterdam. Not long after he had fled, he was apprehended and extradited back to Britain to face punishment. Massey was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the stabbing. His reputation carried into Category A prison, the highest custody level in Britain. Massey was described as being a genuine man who spoke honestly about people and events. He never belittled anybody and was always willing to give people a chance. As Paul sat in prison, Manchester streets exploded with increasing violence. Gang members were becoming more depraved with their approach to offending. Shootings, stabbings, petrol bombs and explosives became rampant in the city. Paul had proven himself to be a violent man, but he had the ability to keep a lid on the underworld. People living the gang lifestyle respected him for the most part, but without him being present on the street, all hell was breaking loose. Massey was fortunate to only serve 9 years in prison and was freed in 2007. He left prison and returned to a chaotic environment. As mentioned, the scene had transformed for the worst whilst Paul was inside. In his absence, Stephen Britton, head of a gang known as the A-Team, was running the show. Paul clicked up with Stephen and helped by mediating between different gangs within the city. This goes to show you the respect that gangsters had for Massey. Massey returned to his old ways, attempting to keep a lower profile than he had done in the 1990s. Manchester police had put a target on his back, but he continued to live life and operate to the best of his abilities. Paul Massey tried to become mayor of Salford. From the documentaries that I've seen about Paul Massey, I feel as though he was genuinely trying to help his community toward the end of his life. By becoming mayor, Paul would have had a powerful platform that could have been a great way for welcoming change into the community, without involving crime. It could give local residents hope, someone to root for. However, he was a criminal, and the powerful people running the show wouldn't have let this happen. It is crazy to think that a fake watch could lead to a spate of shootings, woundings and murders. But, people have fallen out over less. Yes, you heard that right. A fake watch was the reason as to why Massey would eventually be gunned down. The A-Team were at a pub in Manchester and an argument started over a phony Breitling watch. A drink was thrown, and before you knew it, the A-Team had fractured into two groups. The opposing side referred to themselves as the anti-A-Team. In a similar play out of events to gang wars, friends became enemies overnight. Fist fights led to shootings, and shootings resulted in serious woundings and at least 2 murders. Days following a beating of an anti-A-Team gang member, a double shooting caused 2 men to suffer gunshot wounds. The hatred grew to the stage whereby members from opposing sides were trying to behead one another with machetes, like something out of Brazil. In March 2015, someone threw a hand grenade at a rival member's house. Mark Fellows really comes into the picture in 2015. Mark was a dealer and connected to the anti-A-Team. Massey had allegedly sent a shooter round to Mark's house to gun him down. Mark's wife opened the door and the man asked if she could send her husband out to help him with his car. Being helpful, Mark's wife called him down and Mark was put into the line of fire. The gunman wasn't lucky this day because his gun jammed on him. Fellows escaped with his life but had been informed that Massey had ordered the hit. Rightfully, he was furious and sought revenge. Fellows was a super fit man who had already done stints in prison, dating back to the late 90s and early 2000s. An interesting fact is that during one of these times inside, Fellows had been knocked out in the prison gym following an argument with a man from Leeds. However, he was well respected and his name rang bells in Salford. Like Massey, he was a career criminal, and based on his approach to dealing with Massey, it is safe to assume that he knew how to get away with murder. Apparently, Fellows had been offered £10,000 to kill Massey, but the hit seems personal rather than financial, considering Massey's attempt on his life. Mark Fellows was nicknamed the Iceman. His methods differed from your typical gangland shooter because Fellows took time to plan out every aspect of his crimes. He rode his bike to a churchyard opposite Massey's home and waited, like he'd done the night prior. That attempt had been unsuccessful because a policeman had shown up to Massey's house. Fellows was undeterred by the risk of life imprisonment and returned a day later. He was dressed in camouflaged clothing, hiding near to graves, completely concealed and ready to kill. Eyes fixated on the driveway of Massey's home, he clutched onto an Uzi submachine gun. Fellows knew Massey's pattern, and as Massey exited his car, Fellows made his move. He walked up on Massey, who spotted him and attempted to flee. Gunshots could be heard, with the bullet striking Paul in the ankle. Unable to run, he collapsed into his waste bins, and you can only imagine the fear that he was in, staring up at an unsympathetic gunman. Fellows continued shooting Paul, firing 18 more times. This was done at point-blank range. A documentary from the time showed Paul's daughter sobbing at the passing of her father. It was sad to witness, but Paul was involved in the gangster lifestyle. Despite his outstanding community image, many people still felt little sympathy toward him. Fellows had made his escape but was targeted weeks later by Massey's allies. He was shot in the butt but made it out alive. A 7-year-old boy and his mother would be shot in the legs by an A-Team gang member in retaliation for Massey's murder. The victims were son and partner to a man associated to the anti-A-Team. Police took note of the attack, and now innocent, neutral people were being shot because of the beef. This confirms the fact that the gang life doesn't spare anybody. You can be an innocent bystander or a family member of somebody linked to the feud. Years following Massey's murder, and Mark Fellows was still free and uncharged in Paul's murder. Fellows was feeling the urge to lash out at John Kinsella, a close friend to Paul Massey, who had ordered a hit on him. In a similar playthrough of events, Fellows stalked Kinsella and ambushed him whilst he was taking a stroll with his partner. Kinsella was gunned down in broad daylight and died at the scene. Police eventually pieced Kinsella's murder together, tying Fellows to the crime through his Garmin watch and EncroChat, an encryption tool used mainly by criminals to communicate. As said earlier, Fellows was very active, and this watch had been worn during both Massey's and Kinsella's murders. For whatever reason, he hadn't thought to ditch it in 2015, despite it being damaging and an incredibly incriminating piece of evidence. Once arrested, Fellows was imprisoned and sentenced to a whole life order. In prison, Fellows has been attacked on multiple occasions. Arguably, Massey was more respected than Fellows, given the love that people had for him and his standing within the Salford community. Kinsella was in the same boat. It should come as no surprise that people close to Massey felt some type of way and lashed out at the hitman. In one case, a prisoner attacked him in the shower, but there wasn't any serious injury to Fellows. Once again, he has escaped serious woundings and luck was on his side. But, Fellows' luck ran out in 2023. He was attacked, and now has scars on his head and neck. Behind bars, few prisoners associate with Mark because he is a sitting duck. His actions have left him a permanent target. Even in death, Massey's name still holds weight. The clash between the A-Team and anti-A-Team is still ongoing but has seemingly lost steam in recent years. In May of this year, the two alleged leaders had a boxing match in Dubai. The anti-A-Team boss named Michael Carroll won the fight. Whether this punch-up will actually solve the feud is uncertain. However, the war attracted a lot of unwanted eyes. Hopefully, the gangs can remain low profile and resolve the differences before more blood is shed.